Have you ever noticed something strange about One Piece? It can spend 5 minutes making you laugh at the skeleton asking to see someone's underwear, and 20 minutes later have you fighting back tears over a wooden ship. Mary, think about that for a second. A ship, not a person, not a main character in a way, but a ship made of wood. So why does One Piece consistently create emotional moments that stay with fans for decades, while other anime will equally tragic backstories are forgotten almost as quickly as they finish? The answer isn't simply that Oda writes sad scenes. Lots of writers can write a sad scene. The real secret is that Oda almost never asks you to care about a moment in isolation. He spends 100 of chapters making you care about the people first, and that is a fundamentally different approach to storytelling. One of the biggest misconceptions in fiction is that tragedy automatically creates emotion. It doesn't. Connection does. The Going Merry didn't make fans cry because it was destroyed. It made fans cry because we had spent hundreds of chapters living on it. We watched the crew celebrate on it, fight on it, sleep on it, and escape in impossible situation on it. The Merry wasn't just a transportation, it became the 11th straw hat. So when it finally apologized for not being able to carry them any further, the ship wasn't just delivering a plot dialogue. A dying friend was saying goodbye. Oda never rushes emotional payoff. It treats emotion like an investment. It deposits small, quiet moments over years so that when the payoff finally arrives, it hits with the force of a tidal wave. One Piece has one of the strangest tonal balances in modern fiction. One moment, Luffy is stuffing entire roast meat into his mouth, like a cartoon character. Technically. The next, a woman is screaming at the sky, begging for the right to exist. On paper, those tonal shifts shouldn't work, but in practice, they are essential, because joy amplifies a tragedy. If a story is constantly dark and bleak, the audience eventually gets desensitized. Numbness sets in. But when comedy and light exist alongside darkness, the tragedy stands out in sharp relief. Look at Thriller Bark. Oda introduces us to Brook through absurd, goofy jokes about his lack of eyes and his terrible manners. We laugh at him, but then Oda pulls back the curtain and we discover that behind those goofy jokes lies 50 years of unimaginable, soul-crushing isolation, floating alone in the fog alongside the skeletons of his dead crewmates. The absurd humor was the armor Brook wore, Brook wore, to keep from losing his mind. And suddenly those silly jokes aren't funny anymore. They're heartbreaking, and Oda forces us to reinterpret every joke that came before. We see this exact same contrast in Kuma's story. His life is an unrelenting sequence of tragedy, enslavement and loss, yet Oda frames Kuma's sacrifice around his desperate love for Bonnie, using small moments of hope to make the eventual loss feel unbearable. Oda understands the fundamental truth. People don't remember constant sadness, they remember emotional contrast. Another reason emotional scenes in One Piece stay locked in our memory is because they carry permanent consequences. They aren't emotional detour, they are turning points. Take Ace's death at Marineford. The moment isn't just a tragic shock, it completely shatters Luffy's core identity. Before Marineford, Luffy believed that willpower and determination could overcome any obstacle in the world. After Marineford, he is forced to confront the brutal reality that his strength isn't enough. That single death changes the trajectory of the entire narrative. It leads directly to 2 years time skip, forcing every single member of the crew to stop, mature, and rebuild themselves from the ground up. The same is true on a smaller scale when Sanji bows before Zeph at the Baratie and cries, "Thank you for all these years." It isn't just a goodbye, it resolves decades of unexpressed guilt between two men who communicate through pride. When Nami finally breaks down and asks Luffy for help in Arlong Park, it alters her, it changes her relationship with humanity forever. Pain in One Piece always leaves a scar, and those scars redefine who the characters become. In an era where many anime over-explain every emotion through internal monologue, Oda does something increasingly rare. He trusts the audience. Consider Whitebeard's final stand. His death isn't emotional because the narrator tells us how to feel or because characters give long speeches about his greatness. It is emotional because of his silence. He dies standing upright, carrying zero cowardice, with his back completely unblemished by retreat. Or consider Corazon. Actually, how do you say his name? Corazon. Luffy's brother. Or consider him smiling at Law from inside the chest, bleeding out in the snow, so that Law won't hear him die. The tragedy is conveyed through expression, shadows, and what is unsaid. Oda understands restraint. He gives the audience space to process the weight of a moment on their own, and because the emotion feels discovered rather than forced upon, it stays with us far longer. At its core, One Piece uses its fantastical world, rubber powers, cyborg, and sky islands as a vehicle to explore deeply human wounds. Every single Straw Hat enters the story with a broken piece of their identity, and every major emotional climax in this series is actually about healing that specific wound. One Piece has never really been about defeating villains, it's about healing people. Nami learns she doesn't have to carry the weight of an entire village alone. Robin learns that despite her past, she is allowed to exist and screams, "I want to live." Sanji learns that accepting help isn't a sign of weakness but a sign of trust. And Luffy learns that even when he fails as a captain, he still has a crew that believes in him. Those moments don't resonate because they are dramatic fantasy. They resonate because they are deeply, universally human. So, what is the real secret behind One Piece emotional moment? It isn't sad music, it isn't tragedy, it isn't tragic backstories, it isn't even death, it's patience. Oda spends years building relationship before asking us to watch them break. He balances joy with pain, comedy with loss, and hope with despair. And most importantly, he makes sure that when a character cries, those tears actually mean something for the future. That's why fans still cry over a wooden ship, Mary. That's why we still remember Robin's voice at Enies Lobby. And that's why after more than 20 years, the story still holds an unbreakable grip. After 20 years, the story still holds an unbreakable grip on our hearts. Because those moments weren't written just to make us sad. They were written to remind us why these characters mattered to us in the first place.